Hey everyone, I'm Sheila Bell, the Bell here at Praise 104.7. Excited to be here and excited to talk about what we're going to be talking about today, skin hunger. This is probably a new term for many of us, but skin hunger is a relatively, not only a new term, but it also has been applied to the emotional response engendered by the loss of touch in our society. And one of the five basic senses, touch is the only one deemed essential to human life. The need for touch extends beyond the early developmental years, and it also is the first sense to be developed while in the womb and the last to diminish as we die. And today we're going to be discussing how to deal with skin hunger during COVID-19 and during the holiday season. We've got a great panel that's going to be joining me also to talk about this, including some great people that you may know and love as well, starting with Dr. Io Whitaker. At-home care and hospice. At-home health and hospice care is an established full-service home health agency and hospice that provides a superior quality of services in a caring manner. And over the last 13 years, At-Home Care has broadened its services to include a variety of home health specialty programs as well as hospice care. They are a full-service agency able to handle a broad spectrum of care needs, and they are fully licensed and Medicare certified and are accredited by CHAP Home Health. Welcome. Also joining us is, thank you. Also joining us is Anissa. Yes, Anissa is also a Virginia Beach native creative, millennial motivator, and a self-love enthusiast with a heart for Christ. She is passionate about using her platform to spread love and helps people through her testimony. She currently resides in Richmond, Virginia, where she works as marketing and sales coordinator for Radio One. Welcome.
Hi, Sheila. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, also joining us is Dr. Rashida Gray, MD Psychiatry. Dr. Gray is an adult psychiatrist and owner of Gray MD Psychiatry, LLC in Richmond, Virginia. She treats a wide variety of psychiatric conditions with a special focus on mood and anxiety disorders. She also utilizes a range of therapeutic modalities, including medications, psychotherapy, and lifestyle modifications to help patients achieve optimum mental health. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Hi there.
Glad that you're joining us. And also joining us, Dr. Lance D. Watson. Dr. Watson is a 3-time summa cum laude graduate of Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan, from which he holds the Bachelor of Science in Psychology, the Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy, and the Master of Arts in Guidance and Counseling. He is also a magna cum laude graduate of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology at Virginia Union University, from which he holds a Master of Divinity and a summa cum laude graduate of Presbyterian School of Christian Education at Union Theological Seminary in Richmond, Virginia. He completed his doctoral studies at United Theological Seminary, earning the Doctorate of Ministry degree. He serves as senior pastor of the St. Paul's Baptist Church of Richmond, Virginia, and chief visionary for its corporate affiliates, Destiny Schools, Charisma Books and Gifts, St. Paul's Community Foundation, NIA Inc. of Greater Richmond, and Positive Power Media Group. To all of you, welcome and thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having us.
So glad that you're here. And let's start with what is skin hunger? Dr. Whitaker, what is skin hunger? I think we've been feeling it, but we really need to understand what it is.
Absolutely, Sheila. Just as you stated before, it is a new term, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our bodies are conditioned by nature to want to be touched. From birth, we are given that honor to be able to be touched and introduced to the world by touch. And so just as our bodies kind of starve or hunger for water, hunger for nutrients, it also hungers for physical touch. And so when we don't have that physical touch, especially due to social distancing and being quarantined, our bodies are actually hungering and starving. And so it's like a touch starvation or deprivation. And so it's that thing of where if we aren't able to be in direct contact with other living beings, then we actually become starving or depriving from something. So skin hunger, yes, it is definitely a term that is now starting to be clinically used, so in our psychologists, with our psychiatrists, of definitely understanding what's happening in our physical bodies as we're lacking this physical touch during this season.
And we're all going through it, which makes us
Mhm.
really have to understand, why is touch so important? Dr. Gray, why is touch so important?
Thank you, Sheila. Well, touch obviously is a part of how we connect with each other. It's such an important part of social connection, which, as Dr. Whitaker mentioned, is a very vital part of our survival as humans and also provides us with a greater quality of life. Research has been done to show how important touch is for infants when they're born in establishing that bond with their parents, mother and father. And that bond not only helps the infant to develop emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, but also helps the parent in being able to parent that child. So touch is important on both ends of that. It helps us to comfort each other, console each other. It helps us to feel connected to each other. It helps us to feel safe. And so during this pandemic, we've lost the ability to do that, particularly if we're in situations where we are single, widowed, some institutional settings, um, some medical conditions can cause one not to be able to have that contact. And so it's good that we're now becoming more aware of just the importance of touching and how that can be a way in which we are connecting with each other. But it's definitely, skin hunger is a symptom of the change in our ability to connect with each other during this pandemic.
So I guess it's safe to say that there is healing in touch as well.
Absolutely.
Healing and touch, and healing and hugs. Because
Yes.
sometimes we're in church, we see the families, and they may say, touch your neighbor. We don't hug our neighbors anymore in church. But when you hug someone, there's something that you feel almost from the top of your head to the soles of your feet. There's a warmth, there is a comforting and spirit in that.
Absolutely. And if you think about when you get a cut on your finger, the first thing you want to do is, you either want to, suck your finger to sort of make the pain stop, or you want to rub your finger. There's something really is scientific to a mother kissing her child's boo-boo. In your skin, there are many receptors, and those receptors are how we detect what touch actually is. If there's no receptors in our skin, we can't even detect what touch is. That sends all of these neural signals to our brain, which tells us that we're going to be okay. It helps send off signals to say, this is painful, or you need to go seek help. Getting a hug from someone sends neurotransmitters like oxytocin and dopamine, which helps us feel joy and happiness and feel a sense of calm, which helps lower our cortisol levels and our stress levels and our heart rate and our blood pressure. So there are very scientific reasons, biological reasons, why touch is so comforting and so healing. And unfortunately, we can't do it at the same level that we are used to doing right now under our current circumstances.
Wow. So, Dr. Whitaker, let me come back to you. What are some of the physical health effects caused by skin hunger?
Sheila, that's a good question. You know, a lot of the things that we normally see, as Dr. Gray said, I mean, we're missing out on things just as such as a simple handshake, just a simple hug, a pat on the back, a massage, and when we don't get that, we get physically sick. Especially what we're seeing in hospice and home health care is that the lack of being able to have their families or loved ones come to see them, and they're isolated and they're lonely and they're aging. These things we're seeing in forms of depression. We're seeing a lot of anxiety. We're seeing a lot of mental health, more mental health issues. We're seeing aggression. We're seeing high stress levels. We're even hearing things such as sexual dysfunction. There are just a lot of physical things that is happening to the body, loneliness, and even there's some that are now growing into this thing of now having attachment issues, and now that they're so detached that they don't know how to reconnect and to reattach. And so when we come back to having to come back into our workplaces and coming back into the places that we can gather, it's kind of hard because we're now in fear. which is not really healthy for us to live like this in fear. And so it sickens us. We're seeing even in hospice that our patients are dying even faster because they're so lonely. We have, a 99-year-old, woman who's able to see her family every week or sometimes, a few times a week. And now they either have to see them through a window and they have, Alzheimer's or dementia. And they don't understand. They're used to having, being able to have this touch. I mean, it's only the healthcare workers or those facility staff workers that are able to give them that, which is still not what they're used to. And so they decline a lot faster. And, it's very disheartening in our field of work.
So, Dr. Gray, what strategies can be utilized to help lessen anxiety for skin hunger?
Yes. So I think it varies depending on who is confronting this problem. I think Dr. Whitaker speaks to a very, very vulnerable special population of persons who have lost already so much in their life and don't have access to their family as they normally would. At the other end of the spectrum is, a 20-year-old who's single and lives alone, and family maybe lives a couple of states away. And I think within the middle, there's a whole range of other situations in which one may be facing skin hunger. And I think for those who are married or, have a house full of kids, this may seem somewhat of a foreign concept in many ways. So for those who are maybe 20 years old, living by themselves and used to having friends over or romantic relationships and things like that, I think thinking about it from the scientific perspective, thinking about it from the perspective that touch does turn on certain receptors, and you can still achieve that with yourself. There is the ability to do things as simple as rubbing your hands with your favorite lotion or rubbing your arms and things like that, cuddling up with a fuzzy blanket, a warm blanket, hot showers, baths, and things like that. Is it exactly the same? Absolutely not. Not exactly the same. But we're just talking about ways to cope until we get back to being able to touch and hold each other again. There definitely is a reason so many people have adopted dogs in the last 9 months.
Yeah, I've been seeing that.
Yes. So the research definitely shows the mood benefits of having a pet, of being able to pet an animal, again, turns on some of those same receptors and sends some of those happy hormones through our body that helps to comfort us. So those are just some of the things that may be helpful for someone who still has a lot more independence and autonomy. I think as we go through that spectrum, things like having pictures of family members around is certainly very helpful for the elderly. Having connections to items from their life, memorabilia and things like that to remind them of different moments in their past. Certainly for everyone, connecting as deeply as possible in the ways in which we do have available to us. And so Zoom is not a hug, but it is better than sitting by oneself on the couch, feeling all alone. So,
Truly a tough time though right now though for
yes.
people to date. Think about it. It's a tough time to date, but also it's a great way to be safe in dating now. It's truly a great time right now if you really want to spend some time to get to know someone, to really find out what's going on in their head and really feel out what's going on in their heart. And think about it, how, like you said, how we were born. It's like we were not born not to touch. And even when you think about people who are locked up, isolation is a way of punishment. Not being around other people is a way of punishment. Not touching other people is a way of punishment. So people have used what we're going through right now, just the opposite of how we're using it just to get through life. So Anessa, I'm coming to you because skin hunger, as we know, was traditionally something that affected seniors. But have you noticed millennials experiencing this due to restrictions imposed during the coronavirus pandemic? What are they going through? What are they experiencing?
Absolutely, we are experiencing that. Whether, because they say that millennials are the group that's not taking this pandemic seriously. I, for one, am, just to put that out there. But we absolutely are, whether we're taking it seriously or not. I think that this time is very detrimental for my generation, just because we're the networking generation. We're the generation that is creative. We're going out. We're meeting people. And so the fact that we have to self-isolate and quarantine, it does, trigger those different emotions that we may not know that we had. Even, the people that may not be taking the pandemic as serious and still want to go out, I still feel like skin hunger is a root of that, because they're longing to just have that in-person interaction with somebody. So yes, I definitely think that this is something that is very detrimental to the millennial generation, just because we are just so used to being social. We're the first generation that grew up on social media. We're the first generation to really just to do a lot of things. So to tell us you kind of got to sit in the house, not talk to anybody, it is hard. But on the flip side of that, I do believe that there are ways that kind of how Dr. Gray said, there are ways that we can practice self-care and self-love that we may not knew that we had to do before. It's kind of causing us to step outside of our comfort zone in different ways. But I believe that if we just continue to push through and do some of these other practices, that will come out better on the other side.
I'm liking that. I'm loving where you're coming from with that. And Dr. Watson, can you give us all of the challenges or what type of adjustments that have been made at your church and organizations to address the needs of the community during COVID-19 without being able to physically connect? That has got to be a challenge.
It's huge because, as has been alluded to, our church is one of those touch your neighbor churches, hug your neighbor, high five your neighbor, all of these things, your neighbor. And we do that not out of just custom and tradition, but we do it out of a realization that people need connection, and that some people go all week long with nobody touching them, nobody shaking their hand, nobody affirming them. And so we use those as very intentional mechanisms in the worship to provide for people the healing that touch brings. We affirm right at the very beginning of the pandemic that although the buildings were closing, the church was not, because we hold the belief that the people are the church,
Amen.
that the church is us. And our particular focus as a church has always been the people. Our moniker, the slogan we use is that we are a church for people on the grow, not just a church that exists for itself. And that was our pivot when the crisis first broke out in March, to focus on the people, their health, their safety, their well-being, how we serve them and how we support them. And so what that required for us organizationally was a hard pivot to realign our staff, because previously we staffed based on locations, and we shifted from a focus on locations to a focus on life stages. How do we support the needs of the people at every stage of life? So looking at your teens, your children, your 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, taking it decade by decade and asking ourselves, how do we support them? How do we serve them? How do we care for them during this time? And we focused on, and have focused on across the expanse of the crisis, their immediate needs, providing food security, providing desks for children who now have to learn remotely at home, but were ill-equipped for that moment, looking at short-term needs, and then thinking about long-term needs. What will be the needs when they go back? One of the interesting things that many of my members have said to me is, I won't be missing church for the foreseeable future when we go back. And I say, yeah, I know, because when it's always available, we take it for granted. But when it's no longer there, we recognize how precious and how important it is, just as we do with each other. So we made the pivot in terms of realigning our staff, and then making a commitment, as has been alluded to by Dr. Gray, Dr. Whitaker, and UNESA, to use all available technology to constantly communicate with our members, find out how they're doing. We have instituted and are building a network now, and this is kind of like a side blessing of the pandemic, a network of check-ins, where using every zip code, we are building a check-in network in every zip code just to check on people and see how they're doing. St. Paul's is a large church, And so people who are attracted there tend to expect and anticipate that there will not be personal contact. And what the pandemic has done is create an opportunity for us to reframe and refocus our ministry so that even though the church is large, it is beginning to feel very small. There were people who through technology have been, I discovered, they have been members of the church for years, and we had never had a conversation. And I was their pastor, and they were comfortable with that because how they dealt with it in their head is, it's a big church, you know, he won't know me, I won't know him, but I enjoy coming here and I am helped by what's going on here. But what this pandemic has done by taking the hard step to pivot during this time is created an opportunity for us to know people personally, up close, be involved in their lives, be involved in the things with which they struggle, the problems they face, the issues they have. So it's been a struggle, but it's also been a blessing.
So I guess they have also been reprocessing how they can connect with the church, and they're finding it to be a benefit where they can, like you said, connect with you one-on-one now.
Absolutely. We have been involved in media ministry for decades, on radio and television and the internet. And I used to get joked about it all the time, you know, oh yeah, you're one of those TV evangelists. But I said to my colleagues, I said, you know, you better be careful. Your arms are too short to box with God.
Come on.
Because in 2 weeks' time, God made televangelists out of every pastor in the country. That everybody had to pivot because that was the only means by which you could communicate with your people. I said, you know, so it's not the means by which you get the message out, it's the message itself. So what this moment has created is an opportunity for both people to connect and for us to connect with them. The other thing that I suspect that we're going to see coming out of this is the emergence of what I call the phygital church, PHY, right? Phygital church, meaning that churches, we have created now this digital means by which people can worship and study and serve, and it'll never replace the physical setting, never. But it has now become an avenue by which people can stay connected. And so one of the burdens that's going to be upon us coming out of it is how do you continue to cultivate both of those streams at the same time? Because people have now learned they can have communion at home. People have now learned we can baptize people at home and officiate over it over the internet. We can dedicate babies online, you know.
Yeah.
Once that genie is out the bottle, you know, it changes things for how
That's
you
true.
move forward. And in fact, some of my, Unessa, some of my millennial members have said, Pastor, I hope you continue to do this because I ain't never coming back to the building. You know?
Oh my goodness.
So I hope that's not quite true, but they've said that to me, you know, so it's a unique and particular time. And one of the things that has helped me in my attempt to help others is to remind people that very few people alive have ever experienced anything like this. This is a once in a lifetime crisis. The last time something of this magnitude happened was almost 100 years ago, or over 100 years ago, with the 1917-18 flu pandemic in this country. Think about how unique it is that the same thing we are discussing in Richmond is being discussed in Afghanistan, Australia, and Atlanta at the same time.
That's a good point. That's amazing. Anissa, so the holidays will be different this year as families decide to forego the usual Thanksgiving. Well, some of them are planning on foregoing the usual Thanksgiving and Christmas celebrations. But what suggestions do you have to help young families cope with the holidays?
My first suggestion would be to think about your older family members before you decide to jump and make moves. I know for me personally, we always have a huge Thanksgiving at my parents' house down in Virginia Beach every year. Grandparents, great aunts, everybody comes over. Clearly, we're not going to be able to do that this year. And it was really hard for me to kind of understand it. Like, what if we all just quarantine for 2 weeks? We'll be fine. But, it took a level of selflessness for me to understand that, this is just a season and it's okay. If I'm not able to be around my physical extended family this holiday season, it's gonna be okay. Thank God that we have technology. Thank God that we have FaceTime and Zoom, and there's different apps now that you can play virtual games and have virtual Thanksgivings. We've really gotten creative with this. So I would say, to the young families out there, I know it may be hard because I can only imagine if I was a newlywed this year. I'd be like, man, what is going on? Like, if I had, a husband and like small children. So just be patient with yourself and just understand that right now is a season where I don't believe we're going to be here forever, obviously. But, God has us in this position so that he could do something greater. And, having smaller, intimate gatherings and really having the time to focus on yourself and focus on who's in your household, it may be good for us. I know sometimes I would hear from certain friends and different people that I know that they never even talk to each other at the dinner table for real. It's kind of just, I'm just going to go this and I'm going to do this. Now this is time for us to bring back the traditional family aspect of things, no matter how your family looks, 1-parent home, 2-parent home. If you're single like myself, like you're bringing back that traditional family because you're being more intimate with the people that's in your home. And let's say you do live by yourself and you're not able to go anywhere. This would be a perfect time. Like I said, get creative. There's FaceTime. There's different, I know there's different games on Facebook that you can play, but, I just think it all roots down to understanding that we have to do what's best for our older family members and for ourselves and for the people that we love, but also looking at this season as something that we can learn a little bit deeper, something that we can learn to appreciate a little bit more. I know that I'm going to come out of this appreciating my family 100% more. Since moving to Richmond from Virginia Beach, I wasn't the type of person to go home every weekend. Even when I went to Virginia State, I wasn't going home every weekend. I was kind of like ready to get on my own because, like Pastor Watson said, it's literally there. So I didn't have to, worry about it being eliminated. But now that I can't go see my parents and my young sisters and my older sister in Alabama and my grandparents, it makes me appreciate it more. So, it's just important that we just kind of try our best to look on the bright side of these things and just realize that this is a season and that, even if, and in despite of, God is still, providing for us and allowing us to really appreciate our family members a little bit more than we did before and just allowing us to slow down.
So we see what the millennials are doing. So Pastor Watson, what can congregational leaders do to help members that are struggling from the loss of fellowship with members during this health crisis?
Well, I think that this is a time that rewards creativity and innovation, that we have to not think outside the box. We have to think like there is no box, meaning that we approach it safely. So we know that there are things that work, and these are not political issues or stances, even though they've been weaponized that way. This is a medical issue. It's a human issue that if you wear a mask, you reduce the viral load in the atmosphere. If you social distance, you reduce the chances that somebody is going to infect you or you're going to infect them. If you wash your hands, that's very, very important in terms of trying to make sure that you don't receive the virus inadvertently through contact with others who may have it. So this is a season where we know that there are some things we have to do, but we can fellowship by phone. Shortly after the crisis began, we discovered a service by which we could, because we were streaming on the internet. We do Facebook, we do YouTube, we do the website, all of that. We meet on Microsoft Teams, we use Zoom, we use FaceTime, etc. However, we discovered that there was a significant part of our population who didn't have access to any of that technology, and they were just out there. So we found a company that allows us to stream the worship over the phone. And so
Awesome.
technology calls anybody who has subscribed, and all you have to do is press 1 to subscribe, and it's free. And so as soon as we go live on the internet, it goes live on the phone line. But that's creative. That's innovative.
Yes.
Now, you would think that nobody is going to sit on the phone, right, for 60 minutes and listen to a worship service. In 2 weeks, we went from no subscribers to over 1,300
Wow.
in 2 weeks, okay, because there was a whole swath of people out there who were disconnected. So we can use the phone. We can, of course, use our computer. My deacons have been very creative using what they call, and I give them credit, drive-bys of love, where
That's
they
good.
schedule times to simply drive by in parade fashion the homes of people who are shut in, people who are sick, people who are elderly, and they can't, hug them and stuff like that, but they wave and they get out the car, and they're 20 feet away and we love you and we just want you to know. And then the other thing that I've been encouraging people to do, particularly if they have access to it, is to rediscover the front porch. In the
Yes.
community where I grew up, they had front porches, and parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts sat on the front porch and they talked to people who went by. There was a shift in our country over the last 20 or 30 years from front porches to decks, where we were no longer in front of the house,
Yep.
we were behind the house. We no longer interacted in the community. We were just sitting there looking at the trees with ourselves and our barbecue pit. And so I encourage people to rediscover the front porch, rediscover the mailbox, where you're at the mailbox. Hey, how you doing? And I know all of you have seen the comedian Kevin, who is doing the commercial for Chase, and he's yelling at all of his neighbors. It's that kind of idea that there are ways to create interaction while remaining safe.
Have you noticed your audience growing outside of the Richmond, Virginia area as well, with people chiming in?
Absolutely. And for the first time, we have had probably this year, we have had just over 250 people to unite with our church, and several of them are residents in other states. And we try to explain, we in Richmond, right? We in Virginia. And they're like, I don't care. I'm in Baltimore, I'm in Chicago, I'm in North Carolina, and I have found a way to be connected with this church, and I want to be a member. So that's presented its own unique challenges for us, and that may mean that I have to go to all them cities and do a service or something.
And preach.
Or send Sheila.
I'm just wondering also, for pastors who sit in the seat that you sit in with thousands of people that you are helping and looking after, I'm thinking right now you're seeing how valuable your deacons and your associate pastors and the ministers are at your church, because they are really an extension of you to reach all of these thousands and thousands of people.
Absolutely. And leading up, I've had the privilege, I've been at St. Paul's for 35 years. I know, go ahead, be shocked. I don't look that old, I am. Okay. But to be there for 35 years. And in that 35 years, I've had the honor to lead every size church, a small church, a medium church, a large church, a very large church. And what I know is that the personal span of leadership for any one individual is eclipsed at about 400 people. Wow. And what that means is you simply run out of time and energy. So you cannot lead a large congregation without a large group of empowered, enabled, enlightened leaders who buy the vision and who carry it forward. And without them, St. Paul's would not be what it is. And I venture to say that many of the wonderful churches that serve our community would not be what they are. I mean, leaders are important. Pastors are important. I don't want to denigrate that idea, but I'm saying that it's much more than a leader, that there has to be a cadre of leaders who are empowered and enabled. And that's true not just in the church, it's true with our HBCUs, it's true with our nonprofit organizations, it's true with any significant social movement, because one person, every person has the same 24 hours, the same 7 days, same 365 days in a year. Nobody escapes the tyranny of time. So if we're going to do great things, we have to do it together.
And I love what you said too. We have to be really creative. All of you guys have been talking about that. And I think about some of the things that I've been doing. Some of my elderly aunts and uncles, I drive by the house and I call them to let them know. But standing in front of the house, just a wave, they smile. And some of them, I've actually bought a plant to them so they can put it on the front porch so they can come out just to see that there's some life out there. I've also been using FaceTime a whole lot more than I ever did before, because while someone may send you a text, it just doesn't do justice. But seeing someone and hearing their voice and seeing their face and looking at the facial expressions, it's almost the best thing that you can think about. So this is to everybody. What are some other practical advice that you might want to give to our viewers right now to help them get through this difficult time of being away from their loved ones? What can we do? What else can we do just to make people feel comfortable? Anyone? Anissa?
Okay. Well, I was going to say, first and foremost, you want to be gentle with yourself and show yourself some grace. I know for me personally, when this whole thing first started, I was just like, Lord, what is going on? And I was just freaking out, and it was just so much. And I just had to remember this is a very unique time, and I had to show myself some grace and show myself that love that I just wasn't doing before. Our regular lives, we were just on the move fast. We had our schedules, we had this, but this time has caused us to slow down. So show yourself some love, slow down, unplug from the media. Please stop, turn off the news just for a little bit, just because, in addition to the skin hunger situation, those things can trigger your mental as well. And it's all aligned. Our body is all aligned together. So it's all just really detrimental if we're not taking the time to step away. And, we've been saying, get creative. Like Dr. Watson said, get back on the porch, get back in your neighborhood, kind of go back to what I believe God ordained neighborhood and community to be in the first place, just kind of, drive by, see your people, and just reflect on your life and reflect on, the blessings that you have during this time. And I guess to say last but not least, I always got to throw, the good Lord in there. Stay close to Christ, because he's the only thing that can really get us through this time. Aside from all the self-care practices, self-care first starts from knowing the Lord. So just make sure that you're staying close to Christ, that you're giving yourself grace, that you're unplugging, and that, you're practicing self-care and loving on your family members while they're here.
That's good. Dr. Whitaker.
Oh, okay. Anissa, she said everything so eloquently. For me, I've learned in this season to invest in myself, to experience some of the better things in life. I've invested in spending good money on bedding, good pillows, and good sheets now. One of the things that I've done is putting myself, I'm always in the teaching mode, but not always in the learning mode at times. And so I am one who, I do not like to cook. I will tell you, I don't cook. I will not cook. And I have friends who are great cooks. And, at least twice a week, we will FaceTime and cook. They will teach me how to cook over FaceTime. And we get to share stories, and we get to share laughter and a lot of things, because I'm doing something that they're witnessing I've never done in my 40-some years. And they're like, oh my gosh, she's really doing it. And then somebody's really eating it. So it brings me joy to have my family really eat it, Another thing, I'm not one who I don't do like holiday decorations. And I have a neighbor who is over the top every holiday, whatever season she's going to decorate. And I offered to her to use my yard space to bridge over her decorations. And
Wow.
it's just a neighbor that I really didn't know. And I just said, hey, you're welcome to use it. And we've now connected. Well, she said, hey, today I'm out, I'm going to be decorating today. And she would come out and I would be on my side of the yard and she's on hers. And we would just have dialogue through, so just meeting new people through a different way of community. Even offering to say, hey, I know you got a 4-year-old, I can hear her, and I know she's probably driving you crazy because she's driving us crazy to pitter pat her little feet over our head. So, do you mind if I take her and let her have lunch with us? And it gives her a break. So it's a different way of just kind of doing community, a different way of just being in touch and meeting new people and having new conversations.
I'm telling you, it's nothing like having great neighbors right now.
I know that's right.
Dr. Gray, what advice would you like to give our viewers right now?
Yes, well, the other panelists have already offered some wonderful suggestions that I certainly agree with. Self-compassion and self-love. This is a great time to dig deeper into yourself. I think, like Anissa said, just being compassionate with oneself. I think we can be hard on ourselves so often, and expecting 150% in the middle of a pandemic is not being very kind to oneself. And although we would prefer things to be different, there can be so much gain during difficult times, and learning how to be with oneself, learning how to think outside of the box. My family has rediscovered the value of a road trip, and rediscovered all the wonderful things that are right in our backyard that does not require a plane trip, or does not require spending lots of money. And so I think that is just a suggestion in terms of just looking at what might be right there and available to you that you've not been able to really fully appreciate. And that may be in your house, and it might be right down the street, actually. So having that sense of gratitude, and also just being willing to look at what's around you
I'm
a
just
little
going to
bit
throw
different,
this out
just
here
a little
because you said
differently.
not spending a lot of money. For each of you, have you noticed that you're saving more money, or are you spending more money? Because now we're not going to conferences, we're not being on the big stage, we're not emceeing, we don't have to put on the 6-inch spikes, we don't have to put on the tux and tails. Are you going out shopping, buying a whole lot of clothes, and you're saying, you know what, I can use what I've got?
Well, for me, I would say, again, going back to the gratitude, it's looking in the closet and
How
saying,
about that?
there is nothing to add here. There is nothing to add to this closet. And I think for those who are in the house most of the time, you start to look at all the things you do have and
Yeah.
wonder how you can have less. Which again, I think is just appreciation for what you already have. So I can personally
Hey,
say
Dr.
spending
Watson, let me
less,
also ask you the same
definitely.
question, because you've been dealing with thousands of people like every day now, it seems like. What practical advice would you like to give those who are listening right now in order just to get through this pandemic?
Well, I want to register first that I am spending less, and I want to share a detail here. I have never had as many interviews, meetings, Bible studies, etc., where I am wearing my PJs out of view of the camera. Okay.
Tell the truth.
so, so I'm shirted up, and I'm tied
Yeah.
up and, knotted up. And then down below, I got on my PJ bottoms, and my house shoes, so it's a unique time. But I want to say two things with regard to your question. And one is an old song in the church that puts a theological lens on some of what we've shared. It said, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and you'll be surprised what the Lord has done. This is a season to uniquely do that. The second thing that I would say to all of those who will see this is some seasons in life are not about advancement. They are about survival. And you win if you survive. And this is that kind of season. where the focus has to be on making these adjustments. Say this Thanksgiving, I give up seeing my family this Thanksgiving so that I can see them every other Thanksgiving. This Christmas so that I can see them every other Christmas. It's about surviving the moment, because we will get through it. That's the good part. We've got good news coming from a couple of fronts with regard to a virus vaccine. And so that's very, very positive, and that may open things back up, provided that it continues to go well. So we'll get through this. This is a season. It has come to pass, not to stay.
I like that. We're about to wrap up, and I know that everyone who's looking and listening right now would love to keep up with each and every one of you. So where can people go to catch up and keep up with you? Dr. Io Whitaker?
Yes, they can reach me at io.whitaker@homecare.com.
Anissa?
You guys, if you're on social media, millennial here, you can follow me at Anissa Love with 2 underscores on Instagram if you want some funnies, some inspiration, or just overall to connect.
Dr. Watson?
On social media, all of the platforms, it's I am Lance Watson. And then our website is lancewatson.org or myspbc.org.
And Dr. Gray?
Yes. And if you find that these suggestions are not enough and you feel you do need some additional help, we are taking new patients at Gray MD Psychiatry, and you can go to our website, www.graymdpsychiatry.com.
I'm just loving the conversation that we have had today, just letting people be aware that you're not in this thing by yourself, and that we are all feeling what you're feeling, this skin hunger situation. We need to touch. But if you can't do it, especially not doing it safely, we want to make sure that we do it safely. And everything that each and every one of you offered today, great advice, making sure that we do use our social media, and that we do stay connected through Zoom, and that we do stay connected through so many different means that we have right now, where we can do it safely. When we're thinking about going away on trips, as Anissa was saying, hey, she used to go to Virginia Beach, but, and we're thinking about when our families would get together, but we want to make sure that we're all staying safe. And there are definitely ways that we can do that. And it's nothing wrong with, as my friend was saying, Dr. Whitaker says, you know what, maybe you can get on the social media and someone can actually help you how to cook. And they will not only watch what you're cooking, and you're watching you finish this dish and then eating this food that you're cooking. It's just amazing how creative that we can be. And we have been doing that today. So again, we thank each and every one of you for all that you all share with us today. We'd like to also thank our sponsor, the BonSecours Congregational Health Initiative. With all of you, Dr. Io Whitaker, At Home Care and Hospice, also Anissa Turner Randolph, Radio 1 Richmond, also Dr. Rashida Gray, Gray MD Psychiatry, and Dr. Lance D. Watson of the St. Paul's Baptist Church. Thank you all so much for making this topic such a success and helping those who are saying, what do I do? Where can I go? This is the place, always right here. And for more information, for those who are listening right now, you can always go to our website at praiserichmond.com. We'll definitely keep you up to date on what's happening in our community here and beyond. And we just say, again, thank you so much for having a great conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.